Hi, I'm Diana Kennedy. I lead strategy and architecture and planning for BP, and absolutely delighted to be here today to share our story, our digital transformation story with you, and our partnership and fantastic partnership with Amazon Web Services. I fully appreciate that I'm between you and lunch, so thank you for joining us, and I can guarantee you a full feast of rich content and really interesting and very deep content on our journey. So I hope that will suffice until you reach your lunch break in 45 minutes' time. I'm going to be joined here today by Mark Pryor. Put your hand up, Mark. So Mark leads our cloud transformation program and has been instrumental in much of what you'll hear about today. And also Dave Richards, hand up, Dave. So Dave leads our engineering services capability. He's the director for that part of our IT function, and we'll give you a really great presentation on the work we've been doing with Amazon Web Services in our engineering space. So BP, I joined BP back in 2011 and thought very hard about joining, actually. Had been previously in the energy industry, but really wanted the opportunity to be part of an organization that had technology at its core. And back in 2010, that wasn't the case for oil and gas, certainly wasn't the case for BP. You have a 100-year-old engineering history. A company that drills in the deepest water, a company that explores in the furthest reaches of the world, but not a company that was reliant on IT. But I could very, very clearly see that was going to change, and boy, has it changed. And what we're going to hear about today is that journey that BP has been on and is on, and how technology and IT now is absolutely at the heart and core of our business, in a way that we couldn't even have conceived before, in the way that perhaps the financial services industry was maybe 10 years ago, in the way that perhaps the retail industry was a similar period ago. And there's simply no better time now to be in oil and gas as a technologist. Let me talk to you a little bit about BP then, just to set the context for this, because I think some of the use cases perhaps you've heard earlier, for those of you that were in the main auditorium there, you had a scale, certainly in their consumption of AWS, that is beyond which you'll hear from us, but not on the scale and complexity of our business. So we're a company that has a 100-year-old heritage, operates in 72 countries, produces $3.5 billion barrels of oil every day. We operate across those 72 countries. We have 75,000 employees, but a further 200,000 contractors who support us. And a turnover of $180 billion, so a huge company, and that comes with it clearly a complexity of the underlying technology that supports that. We operate 17,500 servers, can you believe, across a number of global mega data centers. We support and we manage a very, very large number of user identities, and we operate across some very complex and harsh environments that have quite specific demands of our IT infrastructure. So when BP launched its new group strategy just last summer, there was a real call to arms for our IT function. And I think for me, who always a technologist and an engineer at heart, saw that opportunity to really put IT and IT services right at the core of that business. And let me tell you why. So BP, as an oil and gas major, has declared itself as wanting to lead and be the digital leader in oil and gas. And it wants to do that because, frankly, there's no greater mission on earth. I challenge you to think through that. What we have in front of us is the need to meet the growing energy demands of the earth, And energy demand is increasing by 25% over the next 10 years. But we need to do that in a way that meets our low-carbon future and creates a low-carbon and energy-efficient and energy-saving environment that will support our planet into the next generation. So BP, as an organisation, has declared a position to lead that transition, and we call it the energy transition. And meeting the energy needs of the world to lift whole communities and countries out of poverty through the provision of energy, but do that in a low-carbon way. No greater mission than that. And our strategy has 4 pillars. It's clearly about continuing to meet that energy demand. And our relationship with Amazon Web Services is across all of these pillars. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go through. But shifting to gas, so gas as a more energy efficient hydrocarbon, and really driving that hard through the use of technology and data and analytics. Market-led growth in the downstream. So for the first time in many years and many decades, the downstream business being the retail part, the refining part of our business, seeing growth there through new markets in South America, in Africa, in Asia, in Australia and New Zealand, and using digital technologies to transform those businesses. And then the low carbon piece, looking at how IT and technology can really support the development of new low carbon offerings and products. But all of that is underpinned by the need to simplify and modernise our group. And that's where we as IT professionals come in, and this is where our relationship with Amazon Web Services has really underpinned the meeting of our strategy. So faced with this strategy that was launched last year, we as an IT function, you took that call to arms and said, okay, so what does this mean for us? And we could very easily have said, okay, we can meet that demand for new products, new capabilities, and we can do that in a way that we've always done through projects, through traditional investment. But we could really see that we needed much more than that. And we embarked on a program of work called Modernising IT. And that covers the entire infrastructure landscape of BP across 3 core areas, but all underpinned by a people and capability change. But right at the core of that transformation was cloud. And we started our journey with AWS a number of years ago now, and you'll hear from Mark and Dave in a minute specifically about that journey. But we were able to get into action really quickly through our relationship with Amazon and the developing and consumption of cloud services. But our modernised IT agenda is about a wholesale transformation of our workplace environment, and we're well into action on that already. We've upgraded and we've replaced 21,000 Windows 10 devices and rolled those out globally. And many more to come this year, and we plan to complete that program by the end of the year. And our cloud journey, we declared an all-in public cloud strategy 2 years ago now. And the agility and pace that has given us from a very monolithic and very complex core infrastructure has really allowed us to move at significant pace to meet the demands of our businesses. And then, of course, networks. We heard earlier about the need for security, but also the need to drive agility in our networks as well, and modernise both our core WAN infrastructure, but also our site infrastructure. And that's our modernisation agenda. But right at the core of that, of course, is cloud. Now, let me just give you some examples of where we've got to. So, our response to BP's strategy was about modernisation of our core infrastructure. But I don't think we could ever have anticipated the demand for new services and capabilities from within our IT organisation. And the sorts of things that we've been able to deliver with our partnership with Amazon have been simply immense. Lots of examples and too many to pick, but let me pick you one from the upstream business. So we have a capability called BP Well Advisor. We instrument our facilities. We've been playing in the IoT game for decades now. We stream now 1 billion data points a day from our core facilities around the world into an Amazon S3 bucket, which we then use to interpret in real time core drilling data and allow us to make real-time decisions on the drilling, which has a material impact on the performance of the company. It costs £1 million a day to stop drilling, and if you're able to use that sensor data and interpret it in real time, then your ability to maintain the availability of that drill rig is significantly greater. We simply couldn't have done that without cloud and without Amazon. Plenty more of examples. Hopefully many of you use a BP fuel station. So a new product called BP Me, which is a revolutionary way of buying fuel in the UK and being rolled out globally. All of that built on Amazon Web Services. Again, transforming the way we do retail business in the UK. And plenty more of examples too. One more, which is my favorite. We often talk about having a desire as an IT function to be at the board table. Now, we haven't quite made that in IT and BP, and I am personally committed to ensure that we will. But we do present now our board materials and our board KPI dashboards via Amazon Web Services to the board table in our boardrooms. And, so many more things that we've been able to achieve by ensuring that we've delivered this core infrastructure transformation that allows us to move forward with the agility and pace with the demands that we have of our business. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a sense of the frame in which we're operating. And let me hand over now to Mark Pryor, who's going to talk to you about our specific journey with Amazon. Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes. When you're standing on the sides there, it's a bit of, you got the echo from next door, so I'm going to be loud. Good morning / good afternoon, just about. I'm assuming you're here because you're either working in an enterprise environment who are trying to move into the cloud, or you're building a cloud engineering function in-house, and you're interested in journeys and how others have gone there. And what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about how BP went into the cloud and the steps on that journey and where we are now. We began with pioneers. And I think like many companies, we went into AWS for interesting use cases with those kind of gifted and talented engineers on the side of the company who were interested in playing with new toys. And we saw the classic first use cases going in, which was our public website, which is now all hosted in AWS. And also some of our big elastic compute workloads, so grid compute, things that could take hyperscale EC2 and actually do good stuff with it. And this is back in 2012, 2013 kind of era. So we had our toe in the water. And I think as an organization, one of the biggest and clearest signals that we sent out was we said cloud first. And cloud first was a mandate that came out, and it simply said, we are going to get out of the business of running infrastructure ourselves. And you heard a little bit about it in the keynote. We're going to move out of that undifferentiated world. That's where we're going. And it gave a very clear line to the organization. It started everyone to step up and think, okay, what's this cloud thing and how do I use it? And alongside that, the thing that I've been running for the last few years, called the Cloud Transformation Program, was set up. And the CTP started with okay, so we've said we're going to go cloud first. Have I got a brokerage capability to integrate with my enterprise environment? Can I do security? Can I do identity? Do I know how I'm going to build this stuff? So we began by ensuring we had the foundations to consume Amazon, but to integrate it into our existing enterprise environment. And that was quite hard, especially kind of back in those days. I think we were one of the first doing that at scale, and we built a brokerage service. Now, the interesting thing about doing that was it was also us starting to bootstrap our cloud engineering. So one thing, as Diana said, BP is huge, right? We sell Mars bars on one end, and we dig deep water wells on the other. And inside that organization, we had a whole bunch of people who were already engineers, application engineering, platform engineering specialists, kind of people who knew the on-prem world very well, but were perhaps less versed in the cloud. So for us, building the brokerage, getting started with that kind of early transformation journey was about taking those people, getting them trained, getting them to understand the new world, and starting to build the core of the team that we could then scale out. And the cloud transformation program itself was interesting. So my remit was to close data centers. Paul Schuster, who's in the audience over here, was at reInvent in late 2016. And we stood up there and we talked about our journey. And our journey then was around, all right, I as BP still own fixed assets called data centers for the servers that we own. Right, let's not do that anymore. Let's have a program who's designed to take that out. So the bedrock of the cloud transformation is a data center exit. But our aspirations are not higher than that. I mean, Diana's talked to you some of the examples. This is a business going digital at a hairy pace. So with CTP, we are creating something of a dragon's den. So you need to get out of my data centers, and I'm going to move your applications, and we'll talk about the capability we used. But at the same time, I'm a dragon's den. If you come to me with a commercial transformation idea and you've got something better that you can do, well, I've got some money because I had to get you out of the data center, so I can help you bootstrap your next level of digital. So we tried to maximize the investment we were putting into cloud and to the exit to get us the best possible outcome. And that was a pretty tense conversation at times, right? Because you're trying to manage a business case of a data center exit, but you're trying to achieve a digital ambition. But a great tension to have in terms of getting good cloud outcomes. I think I've lost some hair over the course of that process in the last 18 months. So CTP sets up and sets off. We use it to bootstrap our cloud engineering. So I've got a data center to close, I've got a bit of an engineering team, and I've got some brokerage. And now we were kind of, right, how do we do this? Okay. This is the point where we went to our colleagues at Amazon, and we said, well, can you come and help us do some exploring? So we got some Amazon ProServe in, we got some of our engineers together in a room, we got some of our third-party apps teams, and we started doing something which I think in the enterprise environment can be rare, which is just, let's have a go, let's see what happens. And it was very much trying to embrace, with teams who perhaps have worked in a more traditional way historically, new ways of doing things, two pizza teams, Kanban, let's get on with it, let's learn, let's see what happens if we get it wrong, and let's try and establish a cadence. And that was about building both doing capability, but also the culture of the teams. So the act of putting people through that exploring and experimenting phase was a bit of, well, it's okay to work things out differently. It's okay for us to try and innovate and do things in a different way. And because we had the transformation program where I could feed them as many apps as they wanted to move, we could give them a big testing ground to work on it. So that experiment phase probably took us 6 months, working how to do things, coming up with a pattern. We established different ways of doing patterns for moves, different ways to engage with app teams, created a flow, understood what the workstations were and how that was running. And then, of course, we said, where are the constraints? So the next step here is I've built a lovely factory that I can move N applications in a month. Within an enterprise, we hit, obviously, the traditional models where we've built for economies of scale. So we have integrations with our networks, our firewalls, our security operations teams, all those areas that we have to work in partnership with and collaborate with to do this securely and well, and we were hitting the pinch points. So we were coming up against all those blockers where the teams were scaled to work on a cadence of on-premise, and we're trying to do it at the cadence of cloud. So we had a good collaborative process there, and actually the transformation journey was a great seed to start us doing a lot more DevOps in some of those teams. So if you look at cloud now in BP, there's a budding ecosystem, and Diana described it as the core. Around anything that cloud has touched or moved, you start to see, oh, well, actually, I'm going to do that in a DevOps team now, and actually, oh, that needs to be customer-centric, and maybe it's economies of speed, not economies of scale. And you see a ripple moving out across the organization of people who are changing their thinking and are changing their ways of working. And that again, is a great, it's a testament to what you can see by trying to do a data center closure process. Just don't do a data center closure process, do the rest of it as well. Now that leads us on to where we come to now. So we scaled that, we value streamed it. I've been running sets of central teams that are capable of working with app teams and getting that done and moving it on. Dave, who you're going to hear from next, runs our engineering function. And one of the pivotal things about how we chose to do this was it was an engineering partnership. I'm running a program, but I'm actually going to build the engineering team up as an outcome of that program. We're not going to bring an external in, do it, move it out. We're going to use this to make BP digital at the other end. So we've come to the end of the done with journey with that collaboration. And we're now at the next step of evolution. And this is where it gets interesting, because this is now about scaling it. It's about taking what we've done and actually driving that out into our mass and diverse businesses for them to own and pull this forward themselves. And we're looking at evolving what we learned from the cloud journey now into a center for enablement, where we will have our awesome engineering expertise running, servicing, supporting, providing the tools and capability to help people on the journey. And we'll get the remaining application work largely done by the businesses. I mean, there are innumerable examples of digital customer-facing teams that have spun up, moving back into some of our bigger traditional enterprise teams, all of now who are adopting this. So we want them to take the leadership. We want them to own it. We've pipe cleaned things for them. We've set things up in a way that they can interact in new ways and do things differently, but then they take the journey forward. And I think that, for me, has been the big learning of this journey. It was you've got to start and you've got to learn. You've got to build it and scale it and mature it and convince people that this new way of doing things is better. But then you have to set it free. You know, the cloud is a pervasive technology. We have everything from citizen developers across our business now starting to use things themselves, right? It's no longer IT doing all the IT. We have plenty of business people doing it as well. So in that context, if you don't federate and let it go, you'll lose. And I think the business is ready for it now. The other thing I was reflecting on as we were talking about this slide was back when we started the journey, I think the maturity in the market of people doing enterprise integration on cloud was quite low. We built some new constructs ourselves to make this work alongside Amazon that were good at the time. But 12, 18 months, 2 years is a long time in this business. So as we look at it now, the model you're looking at when you come to a more federated, business-owned, driven, center-enabled is a much more federal model. It's a model where you're vending out accounts to people, you're working out how to trust. So a typical IT environment is obviously very controlled, typical ITSM. In cloud, we started there. And as the capability is emerging, we are slowly unleashing more and more of the Amazon platform for people to consume over time. And I think that's been our learning. The journey is about how you get enough capability to be able to do all this awesome stuff with safety, with identity, with security, all built in. And that's been our cloud journey. And I think what I'll do is Dave owns the engineering team. So Dave is really kind of, I suppose, am I your customer or your supplier? But you run the individuals who've been doing a lot of this work. So I'll let him talk about the capabilities and what he's doing building in the CFE.
Thanks, Mark. So you've heard about BP as a company, you've heard about our ambition and our digital agenda, and you've now heard how we've really pushed the boundaries of what's possible in cloud through our cloud journey. And you'll now hear from Dave is how we've done that and the need to really build strong and enduring engineering capability to make this stuff work. Dave, over to you.
Hello, am I on? Yes, I am. Good. So just a little bit of detail on what we actually have built so far. So, cloud is a journey. We've talked about that. You need to take small steps to start with. You can't necessarily leap an old organization with a load of COTS applications into a full microservices, Lambda, serverless environment. Obviously, that's an ambition, but you can't get there necessarily in one step. So the first thing that we actually focused on building is multi-tenant IaaS. Now, that's been a learning journey in itself. Simplistically, what we've got is a low number of Amazon accounts into which we populate a large number of applications. So they're not all in one pot, but they're kind of a low number of accounts. That actual environment, we've been focusing on security, and we've been focusing on speed of provisioning, and we've been focusing on capacity management, and we've been focusing on building tools to allow people to run those applications more effectively in that environment. So Mark mentioned brokerage earlier on. So what we've selected is we've selected the ServiceNow tool as our brokerage front end. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about other cloud platforms, but they are available. And at BP, we've selected more than one. So we're actually putting workload into both Amazon and Azure. And so we needed a certain common front end that could integrate with our existing CMS services, that we could actually go to and present our service offerings, create an environment, and actually it could then choose to, or you could choose to then go into Amazon or Azure. We've also focused then, as I mentioned, on capacity management. So once we'd gotten a number of barriers out of the way that are, traditional IT organization boundaries, like how fast you can get a user ID, if you really know what it is you're provisioning and the research on the operating system that you need. Once we'd got all that provisioning speed going, we began to see a snowball taking place, right? So at points in the last couple of months, we've seen up to 8,000 server workloads running. I think Diana mentioned earlier on that we have 17,000 or so on-prem. So we've actually got a potentially large number of our server workloads already running in cloud. There's 3,000 or so that are the sedentary workload, the actual ones that run most of the time that are really running live applications, but we're bursting as well. So with that capacity management challenge, obviously your costs go up, not surprisingly. So we needed to pick a partner and get the kind of insight into building the right sorts of reports, providing insight to the people that are running and responsible for those workloads so they could take action. In our case, we happen to be working with Cloudability. Again, other capacity management tooling is available. I'm sure there are lots of vendors outside that look to talk to you about it. The thing that we liked about the service that we built is Cloudability gives you the ability to show your cloud consumption data both at the application level, the platform level, the groups of application level, the portfolio level, and so you can actually provide reports to all layers of the organization at the relevance for them, the relevance level for them. We're also now starting to push into right-sizing recommendations, and we're using the reserved instance planning tooling as well. So at points during the year, it goes up and down, but at points during the year we had 85% reserved instance coverage across our EC2 fleet, for example, which as you know, brings huge savings. We're also getting now into building those accelerators I was talking about. So how would you help a cloud migration team or an application team move their application into the cloud? Well, one way is to actually build those patterns, to use CloudFormation template and code deploy and various other bits of bound together tooling to allow people to drop application code into a location and then have the application deployed to the cloud. So we're building those patterns right now. At the more advanced end of the scale, we've used a pocket of deep engineering and competency in BP to build a container service. So we actually have an OpenShift container service that's been built in partnership with Red Hat. And we've also started moving major SAP systems to the cloud. We have 11 or so of our SAP systems in the cloud currently. We've got 40 or so production SAP systems across the world, so we're a kind of big SAP user. And in order to do that, we actually had to rebuild and redesign our standard operating environment. We moved from a Solaris x86 Oracle-driven environment into kind of Linux, and we're using Sybase as a workhorse database and HANA for kind of differentiating high workload, high performance requirements. That's been a big journey. In terms of our overall 5-year plan to get out of data centers, we decided to hit SAP quite early on, and that kind of comes to a point that I want to mention later on, which is about being bold. So clearly the bulk of your moves need to be your simple systems because you understand them, but why not pick a few real heavy hitters and actually get that confidence going in the organization that your engineering team have competency and that you can run critical workloads. What's coming next? Mark mentioned a little bit about this. So we're proud of the progress that we've made in the cloud, but what we understand and what we can see and feel from our internal customer feedback is that a multi-tenant IaaS environment, IaaS-focused environment, is actually fairly limiting in terms of the innovation that it allows you to take advantage of, because whenever a new Amazon feature is released and someone wants to use it, you need to go through all the security considerations that could apply if that thing wreaked havoc in your multi-tenant environment. So, by building that environment as our first step, we've actually limited innovation slightly. So our next step is cloud federation. The idea there is basically that a business unit or an application team, or indeed anyone with actually a spend authority and a blast radius in terms of the applications that they own, can have their own account. They will have billing and tagging and all the other kind of goodness provisioned to them. They'll have the monitoring that we built. They'll have the network connectivity. But they'll be able then to experiment inside their own account and actually use features much quicker when they come out. Along with that, we found that we need a center of enablement. So because we're at the stage now in our journey where we're no longer just a core cloud engineering team trying to do all of the engineering ourselves with our partners, with the likes of CloudReach and the likes of Slalom and the likes of ProServe, we're actually at the stage now where we want to go further than that, and we want application teams to start learning themselves and actually moving workloads into the cloud. So a center of enablement is going to be necessary to partner up with the federation model. The idea of the Center of Enablement is that you'll be able to come to the Slack channel or the Teams channel. You'll be able to throw your query into the room to say, you know, how do I get some cloud? I've got some cloud already. How do I capacity manage it? I'd like to collaborate on a joint development project. I'd like to do any number of things that actually, you know, make my cloud experience much easier. So our Center for Enablement will be meeting that aim. Can we move on? So how have we achieved this? It's all about people. Mark touched on this. So we're quite fortunate in BP that I mentioned that we're in a large SAP shop. So that meant that we had quite a strong SAP basis retained capability on site. And an SAP basis administrator is a little bit of a network guy, a little bit of a hardware guy, a little bit of a database guy, and a little bit of an application coder. So that was handy. So we capitalized on that capability. We also had a couple of other areas in the business that had spent a number of years developing automation engineering skills, you know, notably out of our trading division. And what we've done is we've capitalized on that group of people. We've actually started to develop a culture that celebrates, frankly, the geek and the nerd, and we're quite happy to say that, right? So, you know, we are self-proclaimed interested people in technology. It's about that, and that's something that, you know, we are starting to celebrate. The training and certification journey is an interesting one. So I'm not standing here saying that in order to be successful in the cloud, you must all be certified. But I do think there's a useful provocation to be making to your engineering teams. I made that provocation. I went out and got certified. We like things like a cloud guru. That kind of method of learning seems to be really useful for our teams. We spent a lot of money doing classroom-based, stodgy training at the start, and the guys that took a week out of their lives or 2 weeks out of their lives to do that training thought it was okay, but actually they were always struggling with their other workload. They never quite got to getting around to certification. But the self-paced learning of things like a cloud guru means that you can actually do a bit of work, you know, a couple of hours a week in your own time, and then just go and get your exam when you're ready. Taking calculated risks. So, I mean, SAP might have been seen as a risk. You know, why put an SAP system on a brand new cloud environment? I don't think we weren't confident at the moment before go live, but certainly when we started that journey, we were thinking, is this really the thing to be doing at this point in time? One of our critical workloads in the lubes business. It worked out very well. And then new blood, provocateurs, and free radicals. So Mark mentioned that the engineering team was in partnership with the Cloud Transformation Program, and that's absolutely true. But you know, Mark and I had an agreement, which is whenever he saw the engineering team reverting to type, a bunch of engineers scurrying off into a dark corner to talk about something and to, you know, effectively point fingers at the security team or the network team or whatever else, you know, he would call it, basically, and, you know, because we were too close to the coalface. And every now and again, inserting a free radical or someone designed to provoke a much more adventurous conversation has proven very useful. So dropping those individuals in that will not stop at raising a ticket, that will go and find the manager of that service and actually hoik them into the room, and, you know, before you know it, you've got a new Scrum team or a swarm developing. And then partnering with AWS. So, you know, we were asked to kind of reflect on what it's been like to partner with AWS, and I think it's not an exaggeration to say that it's been a breath of fresh air, because, you know, a company like BP, and many of you guys work for similar-sized organizations, you do have a lot of software partner organizations that you work with, and sooner or later they all have started to act the same, at least for us, and they've always been reverting to contract and pointing to service levels and worried about the bottom line. And although clearly AWS is worried about the bottom line, what they do is they bring a very different energy to that conversation. So firstly, they challenge us, and they're not afraid to do that. So if they're suggesting a technology idea, because they think their platform can do your thing better, they won't rest when the first person goes, I'm too busy. They keep coming back with the same topic again and again and again, and eventually we implement it and we learn our lessons. They bring a different energy, and their culture has started to rub off on us as well. So, you know, one of the things that we've found most useful is the working backwards principle. The idea of the Center for Enablement, for example, was developed along with Slalom with the working backwards idea in mind. So what would it be like if we actually did have a Center for Enablement in which you could, as a, let's say, an ITIL-aligned service director who doesn't know anything about cloud, what if you could go to this Center for Enablement and actually get all the advice and help you needed to make the best use of public cloud and our internal services? And then the other thing that's been really great has been direct access to production, to actual product teams inside AWS. So on our SAP journey, for example, we've actually helped influence the development of the X1 huge memory-intensive compute. And on a number of other occasions, when we've had implementation difficulties, we've been able to be put directly in touch with the actual relevant product team. So that's been quite refreshing as well. And I think that's everything I had to say. I was wondering if you had any questions for any of the three of us.
So thanks, Dave. Thanks, Mark. So you've heard about the transformation of our industry and the need to continue to meet the energy needs of the world in a low-carbon future. You've heard about the ambitions of BP to be the digital leader in that industry. And then you've heard about the need to get the basics right, to put in the core foundations. You know the story, if you build your house on sand, then the rain comes and it'll tumble down. You build your house on the rocks and it'll stand forever. And our modernisation journey has been about putting those core, those rocks in place that will really allow us to accelerate our digitisation journey. And I often describe it as putting the cheese on the broccoli. You know, if you want to get your kids to eat broccoli, then stick the cheese on top. And you do that because everyone likes the cool stuff. But actually, they know. But we know that you need to get the good, high value, rich food from the broccoli. And you're putting in place those core foundations have been so important. But be bold about it, as Dave just said. As much about a technology change, it's a culture change and a people change and a mindset shift that actually you can take these big steps forward and achieve things that perhaps you hadn't even perceived that you could do before, and do that in a way that is driving your engineering capability, to have an engineering mindset to how you're building both your infrastructure and your application landscape. So hopefully you've got a bit of a sense of the journey we're on, and we couldn't have done it today without our colleagues from AWS, and the journey moving forward is really exciting, and please do ask any questions about that and anything that we can do to help. We'll always be happy to do that.
Well, I suppose the most... Yeah, so the gentleman was asking about the difficulty of migrating a thick client application into the cloud as opposed to a web client. So I mean, the primary example I could just reach for is SAP, right? That's about the thickest client you can get. And what we found was that the actual migration of the back end was still the biggest leap there, because our front end users still run that thick client, actually. We haven't necessarily migrated them all to a Citrix solution or Amazon Workspaces solution. That's still coming, but SAP itself runs fine and with the appropriate connection speed, actually through our CNX Direct Connect. Yeah.
How did you manage the old school thinking around your security engineering teams, and how did you transform that area?
So it starts with having a progressive CISO. So the question was, how do we manage the old school thinking around our security teams and so on? So it starts with having a progressive CISO, and we have several of those actually. It also starts with having those security guys embedded in the Scrum teams that are actually doing the engineering. So we're still learning that lesson actually, but it's absolutely the case that the more those guys are in the room when you're discussing building the thing, the more collaborative that always ends up becoming, and it's not something that stops you at the 11th hour.
Yeah, I mean, my response to that is that you can't underestimate the role of people and culture in this transformation. It's clearly not just about the technology. It's about creating the environment where engineers and geeks, to use your words, can be successful and can deliver that value in a sustainable way, but clearly within the boundaries of a secure frame. And you know, the culture around that is so incredibly important. Probably got time for one more, maybe two more. I know you're all starving. Was I right about the feast of content? I thought that was a good pun. No. Is that my jokes are always, it's really sad when you laugh at your own jokes, isn't it? You're the only one. No? Yeah, one more. No. It's one for you, Mark, probably.
Yeah. Did you hear it? Yeah.
So the question was around under cloud first. It's around the balance between native architectures and cloud re-architecting versus lift and shift. Yeah. So we actually did a sweep over the applications, and we made sure we understood what was strategic for us. So we've got our applications categorized out. So this is our strategic estate. These are the things that are a bit old, but we need them. And here's some stuff to get rid of. And so when we were thinking under cloud first, it was typically saying, well, where are we investing money? And if I've got a strategic application that's critical to a business process, that's where I'm going to go and make it cloud native first, because that's where we see the most commercial advantage from the agility or from the new cloud features. So we use that as a bit of a compass. Cloud first, if you have one of those other types of apps, meant, look, I can just rehost it for you, or we could just do a replatform of it and I can lob you into RDS and get you off a database. So it was a conversation almost about each one, but guided by that real, well, what's valuable to the business versus what's not. It was back to the point of you could have just rehosted everything, but then we'd have just had a legacy environment in the cloud. And whilst we're willing to tolerate a proportion of our estate being like that, because it's frankly a necessary and commercially viable way of doing it, we want as much transformed as we can. So, yeah.
Very good, thank you. Last one, and then we'll... No. Oh, sorry, yeah, go ahead. Fantastic question.
Yeah. We manage it very well.
Yeah. Fantastic questions, all of these, honestly. Yeah, absolutely.
There is a longer answer to that question, but I fear it probably is a longer answer to that question. Come and see me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll let Mark answer that off mic, but clearly the whole configuration management piece is a massive challenge in this whole transformation, and one that we continue to wrestle with, but it's back to the same point. Get the foundations right, and you'll be able to move at pace, and don't do so at your peril. And with that, perhaps I'll finish there. Thank you, Mark and Dave. Thank you all very much for coming and listening, and do come and find us in the break if you'd like to know more. Okay. 12:36 is at the time. Thank you very much.